What's going on, everybody? In today's episode, we're going to take a look at the Spurs roster and kind of like what we learned this season and what we can kind of look forward into terms of player evaluation. We're going to take a look at our foundational pieces at the moment. We're going to analyze them. We're going to look at our future number one pick scenario going into this offseason. We're going to look at who's under contract, who will be on the team next year, at least at this point, meaning that they're still under contract barring any trades or anything like that. We're going to look at who our expiring contracts are going into next season, meaning who's going to be off the books. So we'll take a look at the books here in a few seconds. We're going to look at who are the two-way guys, and then we're also going to go over some of my favorite free agent picks in this offseason. And maybe you guys can let me know who are some trade targets that you guys like. So what we learned from this season, first off, let's take a look at the books, because this is kind of important when kind of looking at the scope of things moving forward. Now, what I do want to highlight here are two or three different points when we're analyzing just this whole picture here. If we take a look at the 23-24 season, we can take a look at everybody's salary, who's the highest paid player, all the way down to who is the lowest paid player on our team. Now, let's kind of blend that in with the next column, the 24-25 season, which is going to be next season. We already see that Doug McDermott is not on the books. He was traded before the trade deadline, so his 13 million, 0.75 million is coming off the books. We also have Chetty Osman entering free agency and Sandro Mamukelashvili entering the offseason as well. But another thing that I want you guys to pay attention to is who becomes the highest paid player next season. And this season, it was Keldon Johnson, got paid $20 million to come off the bench and be the ultimate glue culture guy. And I think he did a fantastic job with that. We'll talk more about everybody in particular and their on-court performance here in a moment. But when you take a scroll down, look at Devin Vassell jumping up from 5.8 million to 29.3 million. I mean, this guy got his extension, and next year is the first year of that extension. And I've been preaching on this channel that the Spurs like to do things according to, I think, the salary books. At least they have been over the past 4 or 5 seasons, and even beyond that. But we haven't had a guy getting paid this much since DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. Now, if you guys remember how we utilized those two guys, they were heavily the focal points of our offense and of our strategic game planning, moving on the court. So I believe that that's something that we're going to have to notice at big time next year. Is that I think I, just like a lot of other people out there, wanted to see a big jump from Devin. But I think we're a little premature, and that jump from him comes next season. We do also see the rest of the salary cap here, and so just keep an eye on those two things moving forward. Keldon Johnson's numbers start kind of trickling down a little bit after his first year, so nothing too surprising there. So let's go ahead and start talking about our foundation players moving forward. Now, I think we're all pretty comfortable in saying that these are our guys. These are the guys that we can predict, barring any trades. I think the Spurs are planning on keeping around for the long haul. And of course, that's Victor Wembanyama, Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan. Those are your big three guys right now. Keldon Johnson, like we just saw, is under contract for the next 3 or 4 years. And I honestly don't see any reason why the Spurs would need to remove him from our roster. Malachi Branham and Blake Wesley are other first-round picks from 2 seasons ago. And Trey Jones. Now, Trey Jones is at the bottom of the list. If we go back here, let's go ahead and take a look at that roster again. Trey Jones next season is going to be the last season of his contract, where he's going to be paid $9 million. On the 25-26 season, he'll be a free agent after next year. So that's just something to note moving forward. There is a world out there where maybe he's not on the roster past that year. But I think if we're talking about just culture wise and what he's doing on the floor, he's definitely elevated his game. He's definitely proved his case this year. And I have no problem including him in these group of players that are going to be foundation pieces moving forward. Not saying he's going to be the starting point guard for the rest of the next 10 years, but I think he deserves a place on this team, and if he's willing to stay here, I think the Spurs would like that as well. But when we're talking about, let's go over some of the per game stat lines. I'm not going to break down the advanced stats here and per 100 possessions or or anything like that, but just basic, just per game stats. Victor Wembanyama played in 67 games, averaging 29.3 minutes. We know he had that early minute restriction in the beginning of the season, but something that's very impressive is that he did actually play 67 games. I mean, this guy was not, rest managed in terms of games played, more just minutes per game. He finished the season with 21 points per game. Well, I mean, the season's still going on. We have a few games left, but I think it's a good time here to kind of take a look at this and kind of get a ballpark figure of how they did on the year. Points per game, 21 points per game, 10 rebounds, 10 and a half, 3.7 assists to 3.6 turnovers. That's something that we see that he has the vision, he has the passing ability. The decision making needs to kind of improve from that point on. It's kind of a even mark right now between his assists and turnovers. We want to see that kind of spread the other way, more assists, less turnovers. 3.5 blocks per game and 1.3 steals per game. I mean, those are the big stats right there. I mean, what this guy's doing on the defensive end, he's grabbing boards, 10 and a half. He's getting 3.5 blocks per game. There's some games where he gets 7, 8, 9, 10. It's ridiculous. But he's also in the passing lanes. He's able to disrupt things with 1.3 steals per game. So a great rookie year stat line from Victor Wembanyama. Devin Vassell, 33 minutes per game. Led the roster this year in minutes per game. 19 and a half points per game, another small increase every year. He's been taking an increase forward. 3.8 rebounds per game, something that was very impressive. Only behind Trey Jones. Devin Vassell finished with 4.1 assists per game to 1.6 turnovers. It's a great turnover ratio. It's basically like a 4-to-1 ratio. And he also got 1.1 steals per game. I like that number. I believe it can even go up. He can get closer to 2 steals a game. He can kind of be in that ballpark. But we'll just see how that goes moving forward. 68 games played for Devin Vassell. Jeremy Sohan right now leads the team in games played, 74 games this season, averaging 29.6 minutes per game. He did finish with 11.6 points, 6.4 rebounds. His turnover assist to turnover ratio, I think, was critical in evaluation time this season because we all know of the Spurs' decision to really put the ball in his hands earlier on in the year. So he finished the season is over for him. He did end up getting his foot, I think it was his foot or ankle taken care of. 3.4 assists to 1.9 turnovers. We'd like to see that. A half block a game and zero point 0.8 steals a game. So he's averaging almost a steal game and about a block every other game. We'd like to see those things kind of maybe take a baby steps forward also moving into next season. Is just kind of the dirty work. We understand that offense isn't going to be a problem for the Spurs moving forward between Devin's 19 points, Victor's 21 points. It's really all this dirty work that needs to get done. Now, Keldon Johnson, coming off the bench primarily, he played in 68 games. He only started in 26 of those games. Now, those were a lot, I think, in the first part of the season, and then some spot starts for injured players throughout the year. He also played, just like Sohan, 29.6 minutes per game. He did average 15.8 points, 5.5 rebounds, 2.9 assists to 1.4 turnovers. The ratio is not bad there. Zero point 0.3 blocks, 0.7 steals, nothing kind of too fancy on that end. I think, KJ's trying to find his new kind of role. Is it scoring points this season? We did kind of need that. But I think we saw also in other points of the season where he was trying to get after it in the intangibles of the game and really seeing how that can impact winning for this roster. Now let's kind of get down to Malachi and Blake, and then we'll finish off kind of these foundation players here with Trey Jones. Malachi Branham played in 71 games. Very impressive for a second-year player. He had ups and downs as well. He averaged 20 minutes per game, 9 points per game, and really everything after that is just kind of it's okay. The 2.1 assists to the 1.2 turnover ratio, it's like a 2-to-1 ratio. I want to see that spread because he has the IQ, he has the passing ability, he makes great decisions with the ball. I think moving forward, I think there was even some games this season where he started at point guard, played a lot of point. And so, I just think that there's something there with his decision making and his ability to read the defense and also find Victor. I think he did a great job of finding Victor in some little dump down passes, little post entry passes. And we need him to just stay consistent He's capable of doing more than 9 points per game. I think next season we should look for him to average 12, 13, 14 points per game. That's something that I would like to see from Malachi moving forward. Overall, not a bad sophomore season, a predictable sophomore season in terms of like he got a lot of run his rookie year. So I think there was a little bit of a scouting report on him the second year, and he had a little bit of an ebb and flow throughout the year in trying to maintain his consistency. But that comes with any second year player. I like to see how I liked how he bounced back from all that tough coaching from Coach Pop and all that throughout the year led to a lot of progress. I feel for Malachi, and can't wait to see what he does in year three. Now Blake Wesley played in 55 games this season, spent a good chunk in the beginning in Austin. He finished with 13 minutes, 13 and a half minutes per game. Love to see him on the floor. Love to see him earn those spots. Once Doug McDermott kind of got out of the way Trey Jones started moving into the starting point guard, there was a void there at guard. And Blake Wesley, who was the choice to insert in that position. And I think he did really well with the opportunity he got. In 13 minutes, he averaged 4 points. His assist to turnover ratio is awesome. 2.7 assists to zero point 0.8 turnovers. He's rarely turning over the ball. And I love to see him create in the half court. I love to see what he's doing, being solid in transition. And he's able to put the ball in the hole. I think he did a great job with that as well. He gets half a steal a game. I think we can see that try to evolve as well. He definitely has the instincts to get out in the passing lanes, and he loves. I mean, he was picking up full court every single minute he was on the floor, really trying to earn his keep here this season. I think he did a fantastic job of that. Now Trey Jones played in 71 games, started 42. Okay, so that leaves almost 30 games out there where he was on the bench in the beginning of the season. It was that whole Sohan experiment. Really put Trey's number lines, his stat line, kind of on the back burner. But he did play 27 minutes a game on average per game. Per game, 9.8 points. I think we all seen his floater game get highly efficient. His reads, when to score, is just phenomenal. Did not expect that from Trey Jones this season. He even put 3.6 rebounds per game. That's another big one. I mean, Trey Jones, out rebounding Malachi, out rebounding Blake, right there, basically a shy, under Devin, basically rebounding the same amount as Devin Vassell is on the floor is highly impressive. And earlier on in the season, I talked about Malachi, just to kind of digress back to Malachi. We need to see him do more things than just score and what he can do with the ball. Really like to see him get those steal blocks, rebound numbers up for Malachi. But Trey Jones did an awesome job with that. 6.2 assists, led the team in assists this season. 6.2 to 1.5 turnovers is a great ratio there. And gets about a steal game, right? So Trey Jones, again, made his case this year that he's capable, able, should be a piece of this roster moving forward. How long? That's up to the Spurs organization to decide. So now what we're going to look at is what is kind of coming into the roster. What can we see in our future number one picks? We know that this season we have our own lottery pick. And when we take a look at I go to Tankathon all the time, tankathon.com, and it can simulate lotteries for us. And there's been times throughout the year where the Spurs are getting the number, or I'm running that thing and the Spurs are getting the number 1, 2 pick. And there's some times where the Spurs fall, out of the top 3 or 4 and they end up at 5 or 6 or something like that as well. So the lottery is going to be very, very interesting this year, not only to see where the Spurs land and what pick we're going to be positioned to evaluate, but also to see where Toronto lands. Now, the 2024 Toronto pick is a top 6 protected pick, which means that if they finish Toronto in the lottery, not in worst teams, because I think right now, if you take like the worst records, I think Toronto is like in that 6th spot. They've been kind of hovering around 6 or 7. The lottery is a totally different game. That's chance. You know what I mean? Now we're talking about percentage odds of chance. They have a good opportunity to get top 6, but they can be one of the worst 4 or 5 teams and end up with pick 7 or 8. I mean, it just happens in the lottery all the time. So what we're looking for as the Spurs organization is to see Toronto in the lottery getting pick number 10, 9, 8, 7. If we can see them fall to those picks, the Spurs are going to get another first round pick this year. Now, if the it can swing the other way, like I said, chance they can. Toronto is I think currently like the sixth worst team. They can even move up to the top 3 or 4 pick this offseason in the lottery. So if that happens, then Toronto keeps their pick if it's top six protected. If not, the Spurs have an opportunity to grab two first round picks. Now, I know that the discourse and the conversation around this year's draft is that it's not a star studded draft, but there are a lot of really good role players in there. And to me, it doesn't make it any less exciting because what the Spurs are able to do with those low key, long term players out there that just need time, direction, and the right environment to grow. The Spurs can nag those guys out of nowhere and really turn them into something. So if I'm the Spurs this offseason and we end up with 1 or 2 picks in the first round, I'm excited and I'm looking for small forwards, power forwards that can turn into top of the league defenders. I'm looking for their physical attributes, their length, their conditioning, their strength, their IQ, and their work ethic, kind of those intangible things. And we'll work on the offense of that player, over the next 2 or 3 seasons. And it's really about finding those guys that at pick maybe 4 or 7 or something like that who have that upside potential. Guys like Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, those long very defensively versatile wings forwards that we can turn into offensive players. Again, like we talked about, offense isn't going to be a problem. We got Wimby averaging 21 his rookie year. We have Devin Vassell averaging 19 this season. Next season, I expect that salary to increase his statistical line as well. And I can see, each of those guys pulling in 20 and 20, 20 points each, So we don't need a guy who can come and be a franchise player next season. But we can definitely use some of these guys in the draft to plug in around our guys, make us more versatile defensively, and kind of have that upside swing. Spurs can identify him. We all know that. So let's talk about who's under contract. Now, when we looked at that earlier, there's really only two main guys from this list right here who got a lot of run this year, and that's Zach Collins and Julian Champagny. So Zach Collins played in 63 games, started in 27 of them. Again, that was in the beginning of the season, that first 30-game sample where we tried Wembanyama at the power forward, which I didn't like. I mean, not that I didn't like, I didn't mind it at all. Like, I love to see Victor at that power forward because it's just totally different. Like, he still does amazing things, except it's just not at the rim. It's on the perimeter. But I just don't think it was working out, and I think it was the right decision to move him to center, which pushed Zach Collins down to the center, the backup center position. But he finished still playing 22 minutes per game, 11 points, 5.2 rebounds. Something that's very underrated about Zach is his passing ability and able to find cutters, find Devin Vassell, find all these guys in the right spots. He finished with 2.8 assists per game, 1.9 turnovers. That's going to come with it because, I mean, we ran a lot of offense through Zach early on in the season. He had a little bit of a slump with games played due to injury, but I love to see that there. Um, Julian Champagny, uh, he started in 53 of his 68 games played this season. That was awesome. And there was something in the beginning of the year where he didn't really play a lot at all in those first 10 or 15 games. Um, but you saw him first guy next to the coaching staff, and the coaching staff was during those games just like always focused in on like if they knew he was going to start long term, but they were just going to let him watch and observe and learn and talk and discuss about what his role is, and how he was going to help this team and how he could help this team. And I think that Julian came in and did a fantastic job of that. Sometimes he plays a lot in the first half, not a lot in the second half. Sometimes he's closing games, sometimes he's not. Just really depends on the night for Julian. But what he does do is come off start when he was starting these games. He was just ready to play. I mean, he was 2.6 rebounds, almost got half a block a game, zero point 0.6 steals a game. He's only putting down 6.3 points per game, and usually those are on 2 or 3 threes that he would knock down most nights, and just played his role. He was getting after it on the defensive end, doing all the dirty work, and just trying to make the life of every other starter out there easier. So his stat line's not really going to show that, but the reason why he was starting is because he kind of reminds me of Derek White in his defensive abilities, the way he's able to put his body on the line, the way he's able to guard, the way he's able to kind of play low to the ground. But not saying that he can't jump or anything like that. He was awesome. Julian Champagny was great. All right, so let's get to these next two guys, Charles Bassey and Devonte Graham. Charles Bassey, let's go ahead and look at the roster to see how many more years he has. We have him locked up until 25, 26. And we have Devonte Graham, who next season is going to be his last season on the contract that he's currently on. So let's get back to our under contract players. Charles Bassey was one of the players I was most excited to see play with Victor. And we got to see it like once or twice in the beginning of the year, and then unfortunately goes down with a knee injury that put him out all season long. Charles Bassey is very raw in terms of like IQ and feel and things like that, but he's incredibly agile, versatile. Defensive instincts are off the charts, and he is a guy that you wouldn't mind. I believe moving Victor to the power forward for whenever they're on the court together, and letting Bassey just clean everything up at the rim, rebound, let Victor get out on the break a little earlier, all that. So I'm still very interested to see Charles Bassey and how he fits and what his role can be and how he can catalyze things for the Spurs teams, because I don't see a lot of negatives there. Again, we don't need him to score, we don't need him to shoot, we need him to dunk, put things back, defend the rim, and all that stuff. And him and Zach, he's not going to have to facilitate like Zach Collins, a little bit different, of a player there. But still, it can be very complimentary to the group that we have. So very interested to see what he can do. Hopefully next season he stays healthy. Now, Devonte Graham, I truly believe the Spurs were like, Devonte, we love you. You're awesome, but you're too good. You're too good for this plan that we have this season, which is to minimize our wins. I think you insert Devonte Graham onto the floor, and we're kind of seeing it now. Now that Devin and Sohan are out in this last stretch run of the season, we're seeing Devonte play a little bit more. And he's doing all these things that we just wish we were seeing from the beginning of the season. He has a great pick and roll game. He can throw lobs with Wimby. He can shoot the three. He can facilitate. He's a little bit undersized, so I mean, there's that. But ultimately, I think if we played him, we would have been way better. And that's not a knock on the Spurs, not a knock on him. I just think it was like, yo, you're a veteran. Your role this season isn't really to play. If we can keep him around for next season, maybe next season he has a little bit more opportunity. But I think he's very capable of playing. The Spurs just kind of kept him on ice all season. And I think he can go into a lot of teams and help them out. And we're talking about trades and stuff like that. In a little while, we're going to talk about that. I mean, he becomes an expiring contract next season. He can definitely help teams win games. And, unfortunately, he didn't get a lot of sample run this season. But like I said, I think there was strategic decision making in terms of Devontae's role this season. And what we saw is him be a great teammate. We saw him be a great teammate on the floor, on the bench, cheering on guys, talking to guys when they come off the floor. And he was awesome. Like, just like Josh Richardson um, last season, who now plays with the Heat. I believe he's with the Heat. He was a great teammate as well, and he did a lot of good work here. And I hope to see him actually in the rotation next season, and not on another team, because I really do like what he can bring. Now kind of talking about Devonte, it kind of brings me back to Blake Wesley. Um, we got to see a little bit this season Blake Wesley play with Trey Jones, Blake Wesley play with Devonte. And when that happened, Blake Wesley is naturally a shooting guard. I don't know if you guys all know that, but in Notre Dame, his size, his ability, and the Spurs are really trying to mold him into something better, right? But I think as a natural player, I like to see Blake Wesley off of ball. I like to see him being able to bring up the ball, make good reads and all that. But I think he's more comfortable, and he can be just as impactful at that two position. And so I like to see um, Blake Wesley play with Devonte Graham, Blake Wesley play with Trey Jones, and another primary ball handler out there. I think that kind of unlocks Wesley a little bit as well, in terms of what he can bring to the table. So just side note there. Expiring contracts, players that we talked about earlier, are not going to be on the team next season that open a roster spot for us. That's Chetty Osman. Can't say enough great things about Chetty. I've always kind of wanted him to try on this Spurs jersey, and kind of hoping that was during a more kind of important time when it comes to winning for the Spurs. I think he's a winning player. I think he can bring shooting, defensive tenacity, playmaking to any team out there. So if he ends up not coming back to San Antonio, I wouldn't be surprised. But I don't want to see him go. Also, so let me see where we're at with this time. Doug McDermott got traded, opens up a roster spot, and Sandro Mamu Kelishvili is a player that I love, man. I love this guy. And there's just no reason why I feel like, he didn't do anything wrong. I feel like he should have been playing a little bit more early on. Obviously, he brings playmaking and he makes the game easier for a lot of people. He runs the floor. He can just find, he can put the ball where he wants to in terms of passing. I think we did see some nights where there was a defensive liability there where you put him on some of the other power forwards in the league and he gets eaten up. Maybe on the small forwards, he gets a little bit blown by. So maybe there's some defensive things there that he can work on. But in terms of what he can bring to a team, he's someone who I would like to bring back. However, there are some other players that are going to be free agents this offseason who I can easily plug in for all three of these guys. And I'm going to tell you who those guys are here in a little bit. But if we have three open roster spots, one of those roster spots is going to go to our own first round pick this season. Another roster spot might go to the Toronto pick this season. So that's two of these three open spots right here. So really, it's going to be interesting to see how that lottery plays out in terms of who we can bring back next season. I kind of have a feeling Mamu's time here in San Antonio might be over, uh, but I don't want to see that. All right, so now let's take a look at our two-way contract situation. We have Sidi Sissoko, who I think has made plenty of improvement this year. He's been able to showcase his skill set, his versatility in Austin. But you know how it is with these two-way guys; they will be there again in the second year for the most part. Don Barlow played his way out of it, things like that, right? This upcoming NBA draft, there are two second-round picks that are owned by the San Antonio Spurs. So if they do intend to keep those and draft in the second round, we can look to fill the two extra two-way spots that we do have on the roster. So stay tuned for that also during the draft. Now, the next part is kind of purely speculation, free agent targets and trade targets. Now, I think first off, we understand that the point guard, the forward position, and the center position, we need to kind of look to improve either up top or in the depth category of those positions. Now, shooting guard is really the only one that's not there. And that's because we got Devin, Malachi. We got a couple guys there already to fill that spot. Again, I've talked about this on a previous episode. I would just love to have both Jones brothers in our roster. I do not mind that tandem working together, one being the starter, one being the backup. I think obviously the older brother Tyus would end up being a starter, and Trey Jones gets to do what he does at a high level coming off the bench. Then there's the Trey Young conversation that's been out there for already a long time. I think we've talked about that in other videos as well. If the Spurs decide that it's something that they want to do, I'd be very excited to see that happen. Tyus Jones is a free agent this upcoming season. Trey Young would have to be acquired in the trade market. If they think it's a good idea, so do I. If they don't think it's a good idea, I can understand them going in a different direction at point guard instead of looking at Trey Young. Now, at the forward position, in upcoming free agents this summer, there are two guys that I'm really looking forward to seeing if the Spurs make a move and try to get them in our organization. One is Nicholas Batum, the fellow Frenchman, and the other is the former Spur, Kyle Anderson, and trying to bring Slow-Mo back into the fold. And the reason why I like both of these guys, obviously Nicholas Batum is a lot older. Kyle Anderson isn't some spring chicken either. He's getting a little bit older as well. but both of them can do a couple of different things. They both can either start or come off the bench. They both are high level IQ players, great passers, great facilitators, great players that understand their role. And I think when we're trying to build around Wimby, another thing that they can both do is teach and lead. And I think Nicholas Batum, with his plethora of experience, also, there's going to be a connection between them two this summer in the Olympics. And then Kyle Anderson is a guy that can come in and he knows the Spurs way. He's been a part of great organizations, great teams in Memphis and now in Minnesota. And if there's a way we can bring him to come off the bench for us and take on that leadership role, I would like to see that happen a lot. And maybe there's like a sign and trade deal with Devontae Graham or something like that working out to kind of get these things going. And maybe we can kind of get off some salary to bring in some salary. Kyle Anderson, I think when I saw was making 9 or 10 million a year. Nicholas Batum, I'm not too sure, but I would like to see them both. I mean, if any, I mean, like best case scenario, you get Tyus, Nicholas Batum, and Kyle Anderson into the organization to lead vocally, lead in the locker room, teach how to be a pro, but also how to play this game at this level. All of those guys have been a part of some high level basketball at this point. So that's just purely speculation on my point. Y'all can let me know what you guys think. There's a long list of free agents and things like that I'll get into later in the summer. First, we kind of have to evaluate where we're at now, see how that lottery plays out, and then we can kind of approach the draft and free agency after that and see what the roster looks like. So now that you kind of have a bigger picture of what needs to kind of get done this off season and kind of keep that long term scope in there as well to see how we can improve. We always want to be in a position to improve and not be locked into anything in particular. I think over the next 2 to 3 seasons, and then next thing we're going to see is 2 3 years from now is Wimby and Devin getting paid and being the guys on this roster. So everything else needs to be complementary at this point, and are some pieces that are going to help our team grow either on or off the court, leadership wise, veteran wise, things like that. And I like our young players. I think we're going to acquire quite a few more young players, not just in this upcoming draft, but in the next 2 or 3 drafts coming up as well. I think we have about 5 or 6 first round picks, or including picks that we're getting from other teams and possible swaps and things like that over the next few years. So we're going to need to be flexible in where our roster is, and then once we figure out what it is that's going to take us to playoff contention, championship contention, that's when we kind of stick with it and build around that idea. So let me know what you guys think of this episode. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you like my perspective. Make sure to like the video, leave a comment down below. I love all the comments, reading them down below. So most importantly, let me know what you guys think in terms of what the Spurs should be doing, who they should be looking to acquire maybe in the offseason, anybody under contract that you feel is movable. Should we bring any of the expiring contracts back? And then let me know what we see. We'll find out what's going to happen in the next few months. Go Spurs, go. I'll catch you guys on the next one.